Okay, we are live. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It's Sabrina Khan from FuelYourselfFabulous.tv, and I've got a really special guest on with me today. So, Marianne Williamson, who's a FODMAP expert, IBS food expert, specialist allergy dietitian. But before Marianne comes on, I just wanted to tell you why I set up this platform and why I'm so passionate about clean eating and food as medicine and sort of the nutritional benefits of food. I myself was struggling with weight all my life, weight issues, and also I suffered from IBS most of my life for over 20 years. And a few years ago, I started working out with a personal trainer, and I've got to say it just absolutely changed my life because I was focusing on the food I was eating and nourishing my body correctly. And not only did I lose weight, but also got into really good habits of clean eating. I also healed my IBS sort of 95%. So after 20 years of sort of chronic symptoms on digestive problems, I actually, I was relieved all that time. I also got rid of my cholesterol because I had high cholesterol. I ward off diabetes, which is something that runs in the family, and I also sort of got over a really bad cancer scare. So that is why I'm so passionate about the whole area of food and nutrition, and that's why I set up this platform, because I think the world we live in right now, the chronic disease is rife, obesity is rife, and people really need to have this information because it potentially can be life-saving. And for the next couple of months and for the last few months, my whole area has been around digestive health with a main focus on IBS, and foods and treatments to heal that, because I was diagnosed that I had IBS, even though, as Marianne will tell you, it is kind of a generic term that people in the medical profession give a sort of set of recurrent symptoms. So yeah, Marianne, really pleased to have you on. Oh, sorry, and before, if it's a live show, you can ask questions in the end. If you go to the bottom of the page, you can leave your questions with Marianne and she'll answer them. So yeah, let's get into the interview, Marianne. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and sort of kind of the treatments that you do, and really what is FODMAPs?
Okay, well, it's a really, really interesting area, and something that has reached the UK really as recently as 2010.
Yes.
In fact, I was one of the first 10 dietitians to be trained by King's College London in the FODMAP diet. So it's, I mean, now there are several hundred dietitians trained, thank goodness, because we need more and more. It's a very interesting diet. It was developed in Australia by a medical team over there, and a gastroenterologist at Guy's and St Thomas's in London went over and spent time with them and brought it back here. And one of the researchers from Australia has come over here and is working over here now doing more UK-based research on the FODMAP diet too. It's been unbelievably helpful for irritable bowel syndrome. I have to say, up until that point, we didn't really have any truly effective dietary treatments for irritable bowel syndrome. And this has really revolutionized the treatment of irritable bowel syndrome. I myself suffered with IBS, which is why I too have a particular interest in it and can relate quite easily to many of my patients. So when I first heard of the diet, I was, very excited and determined to learn more. I set up the first UK dietetic clinic for the NHS, specializing in FODMAPs and irritable bowel syndrome back in 2011, 2012. And that is now being copied nationally. We've got several clinics setting up nationally using the FODMAP diet to deal with these patients. And it's about 74% of our patients get better. It works particularly well with patients with diarrhea. It's not so successful with the ones with constipation. It does work with some of those, but it's not generally so successful. It's the patients with diarrhea, predominant IBS, that really benefit from it. And it's been absolutely fantastic. Most of the gastroenterologists now in the UK will refer their IBS patients for the FODMAP diet. The problem now is finding a FODMAP trained dietitian to give the patient the right information. You do need help with the diet. It's very, very difficult to do it on your own. It's quite a complicated diet. You need proper booklets. King's College produce a series of booklets like this, and there are actually 3 of them in the series, and they are really important because they give you all the information and the foods that you can and can't have, and it's updated regularly with the research that's coming out of King's College London. So it's really important that you get proper advice and don't try and do it straight off the internet, because that can cause all sorts of problems.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I was going to ask you. Is it a diet that needs to have like special, that needs to have a dietitian involved? I myself have done a lot of research on it, and I mean, I'm going for all sorts of tests anyway because I want to get to the bottom of it. And I generally follow Monash app advice because obviously they were the original people that started the research. But should the diet always be followed under the guidance of a dietitian? And have you come across really bad sort of symptoms and adverse effects when people have not followed the diet with the dietitian's advice?
Well, I think that's all very good questions, and the research shows that the diet is best done under the guidance of a dietitian. Now, Monash University, which is the medical school in Australia, have produced an app, a phone app, yes. Which is available. It's about $6.99. It's quite expensive, but it's good. It's got all the information you need about it. And on there, they talk about you following their guidance and doing a 1-week trial, for instance. And I think, so therefore, yes, in theory, you can. The only trouble with that app is it's very Australian focused. So it's a lot of Australian foods, and the quantities and types of foods can be slightly different to our UK-based literature. And if you're in the UK, you really probably need to follow the UK guidance. But certainly that app is an excellent start for anybody who can't get hold of a FODMAP-trained dietitian. Trying to do it on your own, when I see patients who've done it on their own, some of them will have coped brilliantly, but a lot will have really struggled. And the other problem is that it's really important that you reintroduce the foods. Now, I see patients who've been sent off to go and do the FODMAP diet on their own, and a year later, they're still on the FODMAP diet. Now, that's really not good.
No.
Because it's socially very restrictive. It's not, although it's supposed to be nutritionally adequate, a lot of these patients, because they've done it on their own, have actually done some of the wrong things, and they've now got a diet that's not nutritionally adequate, going on for far too long. And the recent research has shown that the FODMAP diet can affect the gut bacteria, can actually reduce some of the good bacteria. So we really don't want to be doing that. We really want you to trial it. You get yourself steady on the diet, and then you reintroduce, because the reintroduction is your diagnosis. Without the reintroduction, you don't know which foods are causing the problem, because it won't be all of them. So you take them all out, and then you reintroduce. We have a separate booklet, which is the reintroduction booklet. And that is all to advice on how to reintroduce the foods one by one, so that you can find out which were the foods that were a problem for you personally, because everybody will be different. It'll be different for different people. Some people it might be 2 or 3 things. Some people it might be completely different food that causes the problem. So the idea is you take them all out, and then you reintroduce to get your diagnosis as to which ones were the problem. So without that reintroduction, you've got no diagnosis, not really.
But doesn't the hydrogen breath testing sort of help somewhat towards sort of knowing which kind of foods you're sort of, you're going to have problems with, and which kind of foods you're not going to have problems with? Wouldn't that kind of breath testing help you at all?
Testing is a lovely idea, and we all like tests because it gives you very clear guidance on what you should do. But with the FODMAP diet, it's not that useful. You've got lactose breath testing and you've got fructose breath testing. Now, both of those foods are very easy to eliminate from the diet anyway. The big food in the FODMAP diet are the fructans, and there's no breath testing for that. The other problem with breath testing is it's very time consuming. It takes quite a lot of the patient's time to get it done. It can be very expensive. It can be difficult to find or get hold of. It's also, much more importantly, very difficult to interpret the results. So unless you see somebody who is regularly using breath testing, it can be difficult to get the correct answers from those breath testing results. So, and the other thing is that with lactose, you can just simply use lactose-free products for a couple of weeks and see if you're better. So what's the point in going through all that. With fructose, there are very few foods that you really need to eliminate with fructose. So actually you can take those out very quickly and get your answer. So again, is it really necessary to do a fructose breath test?
So what kind of foods, just ask, what kind of foods will you eliminate sort of for fructose?
So fructose, you'll really look at things like some of the fruit like mangoes and figs, for instance, cherries. You've got asparagus, sugar snap peas, you've got honey, and you've got the fructose-based sweetener that is used in a lot of foods. So much more in the States. It's used a lot more in the States than it is in the UK. But it can be things like sweet chili sauces, in some yogurts, in some cereal bars, etc. So it's having the guidance to know what you're looking for, because it'll often say glucose fructose syrup. If it just said glucose syrup, that's fine. But as soon as the word fructose is in there, it's a no-no. But actually, compared to things like the FODMAPs, the fructans, it's actually fructose is in comparably few foods. So I think fructose is one of the easy things, and so is lactose, very easy to eliminate. And therefore, I personally wouldn't advocate worrying too much about getting the breath test. I never use breath tests with any of my patients, and I've seen hundreds of patients, and we just don't need it. If you're with a tertiary centre up in London or one of the big hospitals, they may well supply, and that's fine. That's really absolutely no problem. If you can get it done and it's easy to get done, then go for it. But I wouldn't stress about the fact that you can't access those tests, because they're really of comparative little use.
Okay, that's fine. But you know, sort of, I went to my doctors and I was diagnosed by the specialist that I had IBS, and they didn't refer me to a dietitian. And I'm networked in a few groups, and some of them are saying we got referred to a dietitian, but I'm still sort of lost. And obviously, like you said, there isn't enough dietitians around. So how do we get around that? You know, for myself, because I've been on a clean, I sort of eat quite clean anyway, and I've eliminated a lot of things out my diet anyway, a lot of breads, a lot of milks. I find it quite easy to eliminate a few more, you know, just to see what works for me and not. So what is the situation around these scenarios?
Well, I think it's important, if you see a dietitian or your GP or your consultant refers you to a dietitian, that dietitian has done the FODMAP training. Right. So that's the first thing, is that you unfortunately will get people referred to dietitians who haven't done the FODMAP training. They may know a bit about it, they may have read all the booklets, but they actually haven't studied it. It's a 3-day course that you do at King's to study it, and it really is important. The other problem that we come across sometimes is that some dietitians are not using the proper booklets, so they're using bits of paper which aren't as informative and not as easy to use. So it's really important you see a dietitian that A is trained and B has the proper booklets to give to the patient, so that the patient is armed with the correct and most up-to-date information. Then there should be no problem. Of all the patients I see, we probably have a very small dropout rate of about, I think, got a feeling our dropout rate is about 15%. Now that sounds quite high, but that's an awful lot of people that go through an 8-week FODMAP diet with absolutely no problem at all. A lot of them will be slightly horrified at all the things they've got to do to begin with, but they very soon get into it. They know it's only for 8 weeks, and then they can start reintroducing the foods again. And you can maintain a very healthy, normal diet on the FODMAP diet if you've got the correct information.
Right. Okay. So it's not a diet that lasts forever. You want people to start reintroducing food. Is that correct?
Absolutely imperative. It's absolutely vital that they go through the reintroduction. That is your diagnosis. Without that, you have no idea why you're feeling better. Which food was it that was causing the problem? Because it won't have been all of them. So it's absolutely vital. And the dietitian, this is the other problem I come across, that people get sent to a nutritionist or dietitian who gives them the diet and then never books them in to see them again. Now,
this is a situation.
That's the problem. You must be reviewed. You must be reviewed. So, you know, you've got 3 things there. It has to be properly trained dietitian who's done the proper training. They've got the proper booklets, and they're going to review you, because the review is really, really fundamental. Trying to do that reintroduction without their support is really difficult. There's no way around the fact that you need help and support from somebody trained. The app is a starting point. It's a sort of fallback if there is no other answer. And at least you know it's the Monash app, so therefore although very Australian based with the foods, it is at least correct physiology and information. But it's still not as good as going to see the dietitian who's trained. Only dietitians can be trained in the UK at the moment, and you just can't do the training at King's College. So at the moment, you really do need to see a dietitian. A lot of them do work privately and on the NHS. I myself do both, and King's College also produce a list of all their trained dietitians nationally. So that list is fantastic. It's on their website, and you can just download it, and it's got the list of all the dietitians that have done the training in the UK, and whether they work privately or on the NHS or both. So that would be a really good starting point for anybody that wants help.
Okay, so so just say you live in an area and there is no FODMAP trained dietitian, and like people do, they go on the internet and they start browsing, and they want to like start themselves. So originally they just want to have a bash themselves. Firstly, I know you don't recommend that, but worst case scenario, if people wanted to do that, where should they start? Like, what is their starting point for that, Marianne?
Well, I think it's a really good question, Sabrina. And I think the fact that you and I are sitting here now, and I have no idea where you are at this very moment. And, you know, I'm in Somerset, but I actually don't know where you are. So it's a very good answer to that, because actually many dietitians work by Skype or FaceTime, or, you know, there are so many ways that you can now see a dietitian without having one locally. I absolutely can't advocate you starting a diet on your own, because it really is just too complicated. And the chances are then you get a bad result, it doesn't work properly, and then you're disillusioned with the diet because you think, well, that didn't work. But the only reason it didn't work is because you didn't do it properly and didn't have the correct information. So I think, you know, what I do with patients who I see by Skype or FaceTime is that I will literally, while I'm on Skyping them or FaceTiming, I will be emailing them the right information on the booklets, and afterwards I will post the full booklet to them. So there's absolutely no reason why they need to be accessing information on the internet that's not accurate and can just cause more confusion. So although I would love to say to you, yeah, they could just start by trying to take these things out or those things, it's a minefield, and I think it would be unprofessional of me to advocate that. I really feel that with technology now, you can always get hold of a trained dietitian. If you've got that King's College list of all the UK dietitians, and then just ask them if they'll do Skype or FaceTime. The great thing about dietetics is we don't need to touch you. So therefore, the only thing between myself and you now is a piece of glass on the computer. So actually, we can do everything over the internet if we need.
We just did. We got you all set up so we could in half an hour, didn't we?
Yeah.
No, that's really, really good advice, because like I said, I'm sort of networked in a lot of groups, and I see people go on, and I think like after a year, they're still on the FODMAPs diet. And I know, because I've read a lot of articles by Patsy Katsas and some of the more senior figures in this area, that you should only do it for a certain amount of time, and after that you need to really start introducing food. So if people are out there that are listening that have just been left in the lurch, you advise very strongly to go back to the dietitian that started them, or just find another dietitian to help them.
Yeah, I mean, if they've lost faith in the dietitian they had, then I would get onto King's College London's website, and I would download that list of dietitians throughout the UK and find one that perhaps works privately. If not, find one that's NHS in your area and try again. It's always very difficult if you've had a bad experience to go back to the same person. But definitely that is the other option. If they're still on their list, then they should be contacting and say, I need to be reviewed now. Please, can you book me in for a review? That half the problem, though, is sadly with the NHS is that we are so busy. I mean, my wait list is like 3 or 4 months on the NHS.
Wow.
So, you know, and if you've got to then find another appointment to review the patient, I mean, we always do review the patient as standard, but it can be difficult for the NHS to literally fit the number of patients in, and that can be one of the problems. What we're starting now is FODMAP groups, because that way we can see more patients at once. And although a lot of people don't like the idea of talking about their bowels and their guts in front of people, in fact, the FODMAP groups that we've already done are absolutely brilliant. And the patients afterwards said, God, I wish I'd come earlier. And that way the NHS can see more people at once, and we can get through the numbers of people. And also they learn all together, and they've got each other for support then as well. And we go through all sorts of packaging and how to read the labels and all the information they need in the group. So that's something that's started to be done more and more in the NHS now, is FODMAP groups, and I would really strongly recommend those to your patients. I think they're an excellent way of getting the right information, perhaps more quickly than waiting for a one-to-one appointment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Well, they could always run sort of FODMAP groups for women and separate ones for men, so that, you know, so everyone, so people, you know, women get a bit uneasy, and I think the opposite sex do as well. But what for people that aren't in the UK? Because obviously we're online, this is international, we'll have people all over the world. So what for those viewers that aren't based in the UK, how should they seek direct help?
Very, very difficult, and I'm not sure I've got an easy answer. Again, FaceTime, Skype with the UK dietitian. If they speak English, then that's great. And you may find that several of the King's College trained dietitians that are on the list are multilinguistic. So we have a lot of dietitians from different cultures and different backgrounds, so there may be some that will speak their language. The majority obviously will be English-based, but there's no reason why you can't do it internationally. I see patients internationally all the time over Skype and FaceTime. So that is a possibility for those people. The trouble is, it's difficult to answer that question because I don't know really what goes on in other countries. Australia obviously has got lots of people trained, and I know that in, I think it's Holland, there is a very good number of dietitians trained, because we get a lot of them coming over to do the King's course.
Wow.
So there are European countries now that are getting more and more of these dietitians trained at King's. So they fly over, they come and do the course at King's, and then they'll take it back. And they are starting to set up training of their own in their own countries. So it's definitely spreading. But I notice when I give talks internationally, like in Italy and places, that sometimes there isn't as much knowledge yet about the FODMAP diet. And I think it may take a little bit of time for some of the doctors and consultants to become confident that this is a successful approach. There's so much research now internationally in the UK and Australia, etc., that supports its use, that you know, gastroenterologists will use it standardly now. They will send their patients generally. Very standard use here, but it's just taking a little bit longer for some of the other European countries to catch up, but they will do slowly.
No, it's brilliant. That's some really, really useful advice there. And do you think that everyone who's got IBS should go on a FODMAP diet, or at least try it out?
No, not necessarily. I have, because I've done an allergy MSc at Southampton Medical School, so my extra passion is allergy or food allergy. So about 8% of our patients, so not a huge number, but about 8% of our patients that are sent to us with IBS as diagnosis actually turn out to be food allergy patients. So it's not large numbers, but it is a significant number. So for me, what I will always look at with a patient is I will do a really detailed case history. So I always spend an hour with a patient. I can't do it in less than an hour, but the case history and then going through whatever dietary approach we need. But I will check their medical case history in detail to check that I don't think actually that this is a food allergy patient.
Right.
So there's that. There's also celiac disease, which we look for. So, you know, around about 20% of celiac patients were previously told they had IBS, so they weren't celiac patients, they weren't IBS patients at all. You know, so there are different things that we've got to look out for and check that actually, really, is this an IBS patient? IBS can look exactly the same as food allergy. It can look exactly the same as celiac disease or gluten sensitivity. So, you know, really, that's why an assessment with a well-trained dietitian is so important, and not just to assume that every patient you're being sent with IBS is really an IBS patient. And then, of course, you've got the constipation ones who don't necessarily improve on the FODMAP diet. Some of them do, some of them don't. So, yeah, I would definitely not advocate putting every single IBS patient on the FODMAP diet. It doesn't work for all of them. So
what could you recommend for people that are constipated? Again, I'm involved in a lot of groups. I've got a group of my own, and a lot of the patients are sort of, some patients, there's a lot less patients that IBS sufferers that are have constipation. What would you recommend for them?
That is an interesting question again, and I think that obviously there's some really basic fundamental things with constipation that can make a huge difference. The biggest and the first one is fluid.
Yes.
So, you know, a lot of people just don't drink enough. They think they drink quite a lot, but half of their cups of tea are sitting around unfinished, or their glass of water that they had that morning, they never got through more than a few sips of it. you need to be drinking at least 2 liters of fluid a day, and that does not include coffee and tea.
No, the diuretic.
So it's, 2 liters of ordinary fluid. Now that could be water or squash or diluted juice or something, but or herbal tea, but it can't be coffee and tea, and it can't be fizzy drinks. So and it can't be alcohol. So it's, that's quite a lot of fluid if you're not used to drinking that amount. I mean, I commonly see patients with constipation who are drinking no more than 500 mils a day, and that's only a quarter of what they need. So as soon as the weather gets hotter, you're going to need more. So it's really important. The fluid is the absolute most fundamental. And then the other thing is lack of fiber. So a lot of people I see are not eating enough fruit and veg.
Right.
And the fruit and veg, that soft pulp that you get in the fruit veg, is what makes the stool soft and easier to pass. And it helps draw water and helps keep the stools nice and soft. Now, ironically, the FODMAP diet actually takes out most of nature's laxatives, because one of the issues with the FODMAP diet is that these foods are getting down into the gut, and some of them are drawing water into the bowel and giving people diarrhea. So if we take all of those out, we could actually make a constipated patient worse, with worse constipation. So again, if the patient's constipated, I would need to be, absolutely advocating that they take plenty of fluid and that they eat lots of the fruit and veg in the safe list, so that they're getting plenty of fiber, nice, soft, soluble fiber. Oats are great as well, lovely, soft, soluble fiber in oats, that they're getting plenty of fiber and plenty of fluid. Otherwise, we're just going to make them worse. They'll end up more constipated.
And what about psyllium husk? I keep reading over and over again about psyllium husk being really good for constipated patients, and flax seeds, and even just getting your body moving. A lot of the sort of digestive health books I've read are really big advocates and all that. What's your opinion on that?
Psyllium husk is a fructan, so it can actually cause more gut problems, but it can be very useful for constipation.
Yes.
And I don't know much about the alternative treatments for constipation, but certainly activity, which I think is what you said. So physical movement is really important as well. And also bowel training. Sometimes I'll find that patients actually, particularly women, are very conscious of where they poo, in the sense of they will only poo when they're at home. Now, of course, if you are out most of the day and you miss the urge, in other words, you get the urge to poo, but you're too self-conscious to actually have the poo, the poo will then retract back up the anal area, and then will start to dry out and become hard and more difficult to pass. So it's really important that when people need a poo, that they go and they have that poo, no matter how embarrassing they think it's going to be, because at the end of the day, we all poo. Everybody needs to poo, and everybody's poo smells, but we've all got to do it. So I think for a lot of women, it's a case of getting over that embarrassment and saying, okay, if I have to have a poo at work, I'm just going to have a poo and do it, because you're going to make the constipation much, much worse by avoiding that urge. So, I'll often see patients who were pooing quite happily until they left home and moved out and moved in with people, and then started going to work every day, and suddenly they have a big constipation problem. And that's really simple. It's nothing dietary. It's just purely avoiding the urge to poo and therefore becoming constipated.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So if you need to go, you just need to get over the embarrassment and just go.
A girl's got to go. A girl's got to go. It's easier, much easier actually for the diarrhea IBS patients, because they have no choice.
No.
When they've got to go, they've got to go. Whether it's behind a bush, under a tree, or in the loo, they have to go. So, it's actually more difficult for the ones that are constipated, because it's easier for them to hold it and avoid going, and therefore making their problem worse.
So have you found, though, just sort of on a final note with the FODMAPs, have you found that when you go back into the reintroduction phase, there's certain things that are sort of not as damaging? So there might be, for instance, do you find that it's mostly, the certain foods that most people can't reintroduce effectively, and there's certain foods that they can reintroduce effectively? Do you find there's a common trend with that? Onions
and garlic tend to be biggies for a lot of people. So they can often get away with small amounts without any problem. But, you know, if you go out and you have, say, garlic prawns, which have got quite raw garlic in quite large quantities, they might, you know, end up running to the loo.
Yeah.
So garlic and onions very farty, make people very windy.
Yeah.
Those are the two that come up over and over again as a big problem.
Yeah.
Other than that, there's nothing that really sticks out. So, you know, sometimes we'll get a patient who improves hugely on the FODMAP diet, and actually it turns out they were actually celiac and it hadn't been picked up.
Right.
Because the FODMAP diet is in essence gluten-free. It's not as strictly gluten-free as a celiac diet. It's basic gluten-free. And so I do think sometimes we accidentally pick up celiacs. The big answer to that is that when their symptom scores, because I do symptom scores before they start the diet, and then when they come back and visit me, they redo it again. And if all their symptoms have gone down to zeros, then you've probably hit a gluten sensitivity or a celiac on the head, because IBS very rarely goes down to zeros.
Right.
What you're doing is going down from scores of 8s, 9s and 10s down to 1s, 2s and 3s.
Right.
So your quality of life is hugely improved. You feel much better. You can get on with your life. You can lead a normal life, but you've still got a little bit of symptoms ticking along in the background. It's very rare that any diet will completely get rid of all your symptoms unless actually you had an allergy and you've taken the allergy out, the allergen food out of the diet, and therefore there's no more allergy, or you were celiac and you've taken gluten out and therefore you've got no problem anymore. So I'm always suspicious of people who get absolutely no symptoms after doing a diet, because that's very, very rare.
Right. Okay. So that's why allergy testing is really important as well, because it might just be that you've got an allergy to something and you don't have to follow the FODMAP diet after all. Is that correct?
No, it's not actually, Sabrina. And I'll tell you why. Allergy testing is a minefield. Having
Right.
done allergy MSc at the medical school, allergy testing, the only good allergy testing you could get is skin prick testing and specific IgE testing, both of which look for immunoglobulin E. So that is an immune cell that is raised when you have immediate allergy reaction. So somebody with peanut allergy, they get anaphylaxis, they will have raised IgE, therefore they will come up positive on skin prick tests and specific IgE tests generally. Not always, but they will generally come back positive. So what with gut problems, with gut allergy, it is nearly always in adults what we call non-IgE. Therefore, it's not using the IgE pathway. It is using something like T cells or B cells in the immune system, for which there is no allergy test at the moment. Right. As much as we like to see all these high street allergy tests, there are no allergy tests for non-IgE at all. And anything on the high street that tells you otherwise is taking your money unfairly. Right. So I wouldn't touch with a barge pole. So in other words, the majority of people with gut allergy and as adults, there's no testing available for them. Right. So what we have to do, the gold standard for these guys, is that you take the food out, you do a really detailed case history to try and work out what you think is the most likely culprit. Yes. And then you take it out of the diet very strictly with our help and guidance. And if they get better, we then put it back into the diet very deliberately afterwards to see if they get worse. Yes. That again is your diagnosis. So at the moment, there are no allergy tests for gut non-IG allergy.
Okay, makes sense. No, that's brilliant. And I mean, this is just an off-the-hoof kind of question. Is there a reason why there's so many people with food allergies and intolerances at the moment? Is it because of the way people are eating and moving? And, or, I mean, obviously we wouldn't know if there was lots and lots of allergy issues with our ancestors, but is it just the way that our lifestyles have become now?
I think if that is such an important question, and one that the medical profession and the researchers and things are asking all the time. So there are lots of theories, and one of the theories is the hygiene hypothesis, which is basically in the first month of life, when you're first born, your immune system is switched off. And it is switched off because you will be exposed to all sorts of bacteria. It could be cats, your dogs, your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, your mother's breast. You know, all the stuff around you is got bacteria on it. When you come out through the vaginal canal and vaginal delivery, you're covered in bacteria from your mother's vaginal canal. And it's that first month of life, including your delivery, that will give you your fingerprint. Wow. Gut bacteria. Then your immune system is switched on after that, and then off you go. You've got your fingerprints. So there are 500 different bacteria you could have, and each person has about 150 different types in their own gut. And that's very dependent on how you were delivered and what you came into contact with. So one of the theories is that we keep our infants too sterilized and too clean, and when everything's too clean around, we don't get enough access. Now, that's one of the theories. I'm not saying that's the answer, but that is one of the theories, that we are therefore altering the type of gut bacteria that our children have, and that's making them more vulnerable to developing allergies. And certainly the research is showing that cesarean births have a more risk of developing allergies than non-cesarean births. But that's not to say that if you have a baby delivered by cesarean, it's going to develop allergy. It just shows that there's a slightly higher risk. So I think it's really important to realize that there are probably many reasons why allergies are on the increase. That is just one of the theories behind it. But it's one that does have a lot of support in the research community. And
are allergies and intolerances the same thing? Is there a crossover? What are the differences between them, if any?
Good question. Allergies and intolerances are very different things, and it causes huge confusion out there in the community. And I'll give talks to GPs and things, and a lot of them won't necessarily know the difference either, because unless you're taught it, it's very difficult to understand. And medical schools don't teach allergy generally anyway. So an allergy is where your immune system is involved. So if you have an allergy, it means that your immune system has seen a protein that it does not like, and it will release lots of chemicals to try and kill that protein. So let's say a peanut, if you develop an allergy to peanuts, first time you eat it, it's going to be absolutely fine. But then the body will have seen it and gone, actually, I don't like that protein. I'm going to kill it next time I see it. So the second time you eat it, it tries to kill that protein. And the chemicals it tries to kill the protein with are what causes the allergic reaction. So it releases all these nasty chemicals, and those chemicals cause all sorts of problems in the body. Now, if it's an IgE allergy, like a peanut allergy, that could cause breathing problems and all sorts. If it's a non-IgE, it may just cause gut problems or eczema or something along those lines. So it's very much about your immune system. Now, an intolerance won't involve your immune system at all. So it might be lactose intolerance, where you are missing an enzyme in your gut, and therefore you cannot digest the lactose in milk. So it's or caffeine. So the effects of caffeine on a person, like some people get very anxious with caffeine, or they might get gut spasms with caffeine. That is not because the immune system is involved, it's purely because the caffeine is having a chemical effect on the body. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Like food additives and things are causing generally it's their chemical effects on the body. They're not involving the immune system. So very simple. Allergies, the immune system. Intolerance is no immune system.
Yeah, I mean, from what you're saying right there, an intolerance is maybe not as severe as an allergy, because obviously allergies can cause all sorts of reactions in people.
You can sometimes get intolerances that can, sorry, let me just cancel that call. You can sometimes get intolerances that will cause quite severe reactions and will look very allergic in nature and cause all sorts of hives and all sorts of problems, and even breathing problems in some cases. But it's rare. It's really rare. The ones that normally cause the problems are the ones where the immune system's involved. So yeah, generally speaking, it's the allergy with the immune system that causes the biggest problem.
No, brilliant. Makes a lot of sense. And one final question before we go on to viewer questions is, what is the difference between celiac, gluten-free, gluten allergies, and wheat, gluten intolerance and wheat allergies? That, again, I think there's a lot of overlap between these areas, and obviously I know one of them, celiac, is a lot more serious than the other one. So do you want to explain the differences between these areas?
So the difference between the overlap between, sorry, I was just cancelling that call because it kept ringing. A difference between overlap between celiac disease and gluten sensitivity, was that what you were asking me?
And wheat allergies, because a lot of people have wheat allergies.
No, really interesting. So wheat allergy is, again, where the immune system is involved, and there are certain proteins in sort of glutamins and ATIs and all sorts of things that you get in wheat that can cause immune reactions. Your classic ones in adults will be exercise-induced anaphylaxis, so wheat dependent. So somebody will have eaten wheat, they'll done exercise straight afterwards, and they'll end up with anaphylaxis. So they'll end up with breathing problems and things, and that can be an allergic reaction. Something like baker's asthma, so you get people who've worked in the flour industry all their lives will suddenly start developing asthmatic reactions to the wheat molecule they'll have developed it. So that's very much wheat allergy. Actually, full-on wheat allergy is really, really rare in the UK, but a lot of people will react to wheat and therefore think that it must be allergy.
Right.
That's understandable for exactly the reason we were just discussing just now about the, you know, people get confused between allergy and intolerance, quite understandably. So that's wheat allergy. Park to one side, you're talking like, you know, 0.3% of the adult population, very small numbers. Celiac disease, you're looking at 1% of the population. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's hundreds of thousands of people, and it's very poorly diagnosed. And for every one celiac walking around, there are 7 undiagnosed. So it's really much more prevalent than we realise. It's poorly picked up. You'll often get people coming back with negative celiac bloods who then go on to develop celiac disease later on. So it's, you know, that is very much where it is involving the immune system, but in a slightly different way. And what's happening is the gluten in wheat, barley and rye is reaching the gut and damaging the gut hairs. So you've got lots of little hair-like structures in the gut.
Villi.
Yeah, the villi.
Yeah, villi in the small intestine, yes.
You've got celiac disease, they get flattened off.
Yes.
And so they're flattened off, the food rushes over the top and you end up with diarrhea and all sorts of things. But a lot of celiac patients are what we call silent, so they have no symptoms at all. Right. Their gut is damaged. So it doesn't, some of them are picked up by accident, just in routine testing. Right. So that's celiac disease. Gluten sensitivity is a really interesting new kid on the block. Lots of research going into this at the moment, and it seems to possibly be more prevalent than celiac disease, but we still do not understand what causes it. We think it's the immune system, but it's about as well understood as celiac disease was in the early 70s. There is no testing for gluten sensitivity at the moment. It is purely a case of cancelling out celiac disease, cancelling out wheat allergy, and seeing if you get better on a gluten-free diet. And that's the only way of testing it.
Because I read an article that a lot of people, so many people have wheat allergies because the wheat that we're eating now is not actually what our ancestors ate many, many years ago. It's actually been hybridized, obviously, to produce it in mass volume. So it's not the same. It's not the same species, and that's why there's a lot of reaction to it.
I think that's possible. Certainly some of the newer varieties are higher in gluten, so it may be that it's asking more of the gut to process it because it's higher in gluten and therefore more likely to develop an allergic response to it. We really don't know why there is more problem with celiac disease or gluten sensitivity. And indeed, we don't really know if there is more or it just wasn't picked up before. So in other words, the figures might actually be exactly the same. It's just that it's being better picked up now. I mean, it's still got a long way to go before it's picked up as efficiently as it should be, but it may be that it's much better picked up than it was 50 years, 100 years ago. And also don't forget that like 100 years ago, a lot of these kids who were celiac at birth would have died. So, you know, they would have literally not made it. So, of course, it's more difficult to know whether the true numbers are actually any higher now or not. I think what we're seeing is a lot more problems with wheat now because of the FODMAP effect of wheat. Yes. So the fructans, nothing to do with the gluten. The fructans in the wheat. FODMAP, and they cause bloating and wind and pain, which can end up feeling very like celiac disease. So, as I said before, you know, we look for patients with IBS, we check that they haven't actually got celiac disease or gastrointestinal allergy because all three look the same. So I think a lot of people who are finding wheat a problem, it's not because they got wheat allergy, it's because they're having a FODMAP effect from the wheat. No, makes a lot of sense, and you know, what is your advice? And I know that digestive health issues is huge and the NHS can't always diagnose them correctly, never mind refer them, get the correct treatment that is required. So, you know, what is your advice to people that are listening? Obviously, you're specialist dietitian trained in this, specialist FODMAP dietitian.
I'm going back to see my specialist on the 19th, and the only advice they gave me was reduce your caffeine, more water, and less fiber. The rest of it, I'm like I said, because I'm sort of used to eating proper foods anyway, so I've managed to reduce my symptoms a lot. But what advice would you give people that are just suffering and they just don't know what to do or where to go or where to turn, and the doctors just keep telling them that it's all in the head, because that happens a lot as well?
That's a really difficult problem for a lot of people, and I can understand their frustration. And I know I keep saying this, but the best thing to do, free, is to get on the King's website, download that list of dietitians, contact one of them and say, how do I get a referral to you? Yes. If they're lucky enough to be able to afford a private appointment, go privately. If not, find out from the dietitian how they can be referred to them. Yes. So find a dietitian that's as near to you as possible on that list, ring them up, make contact with them and say, how do I get a referral to see you? Yeah. And do it from that angle rather than go to the GP in case the GP doesn't know about it. Yes. So, and isn't very supportive. A lot more and more GPs are, and more GPs know about it, but a lot don't. So it may be best to go contact the dietitian and go that way round and say, right, okay, how do I get a referral to you? I mean, and obviously if you can afford to go and see them privately or do a Skype or FaceTime privately, fantastic, and that will solve the problem. But you're right, it's very, very frustrating when you know there's a solution out there, but you can't get hold of the specialist to help you through it.
Exactly. No, that's really fantastic advice, Marianne. So questions now, please. If you've got a question, please can you leave it at the bottom of this page? Right at the bottom, there's a question section. So yeah, get your questions answered by Marianne. I'm just gonna have a look to see if there's any questions coming through. Okay. I can never tell if you can actually still see me when I'm checking for the questions.
Yeah, no, I can see you.
Still see me. Okay. Okay. Right, we've got a question here, and it's about digestive enzymes. What are the best digestive enzymes to take? Because obviously a lot of people know that feeding the good bacteria is, they should all be encouraging the good bacteria. So Anne says, what good digestive enzymes and supplements can I take?
That, I'm afraid, Anne, is not something that I deal with. Right. So I don't deal with digestive enzymes at all, and I really don't know much about them. I don't use them with any of my patients, and it's never been a necessity. If they're on the diet and they get better, they never needed anything like that. So I would unfortunately not be able to help Anne on that one. Sorry.
Okay, no problems. Because that's the other thing that I've read. Obviously, there's a lot of mixed theories about digestive health on the internet, and I have read, I mean, over and over again, you read that there's a lot of foods like kefir and fermented foods that are good for probiotics. What's your view on these? What's your view on this?
Well, there are all sorts of foods put out there to advocated to be useful in things like irritable bowel syndrome for digestive issues. Yes. And a lot of them are alternative remedies, which I don't deal with at all, you see. So I'm not a good person to ask. Probiotics, there is research on probiotics. Yes. It's not conclusive as to whether they'll be helpful. Some people they help, some people they don't. If you remember what we were discussing just now about each person having 150 different types, and there are 500 types out there, then the chances of you taking a probiotic that's got exactly the right one for you may be quite limited, and they can be very, very expensive. Yeah. The other thing about probiotics is they don't survive well with any heat at all. So yogurt's in the back of a car for half an hour and most of the bacteria is dead. So I think, you need to, if you're going to take probiotics, it can be worth a try. And the nice guidelines say, yep, give it a go for a month. And if they don't work, try a different brand. Yeah. They must be kept cool and they must be refrigerated. And, it's really difficult to get good ones. I think it's a case of trial and error. But the other sort of alternative remedies, unfortunately, I can't really help you with.
Okay, no problems. I mean, that was a question by Alex Zlatanova as well. Could you recommend a good probiotic and L-glutenine? But No, brilliant. That's been really, really good information. So go on to King's College, wherever you are in the world, and look for a dietitian for yourself. And the only thing is, if someone's abroad, actually, they could if they had a private consultation with a dietitian, they could do it over Skype, couldn't they? Like you said.
Absolutely. Skype, FaceTime. You know, there's so many ways of doing it now. I mean, you and I are talking now on the Google Chrome or Google Skype version. So, I mean, there are so many ways of doing it now. On the King's College website, I seem to remember that it can be quite difficult to find that list. So just don't persevere. Keep looking on their information. If you do King's College London FODMAP, you'll come up with the pages that are to do with that. And if you have to look quite carefully, and there's just a little hyperlink somewhere that will lead you to that list of dietitians. So don't give up. It's there somewhere.
And I was going to be really cheeky here, Marianne. I was going to ask if I could have a list of these, if I could have a copy of these books that you've just been showing us.
A copy of the books? Well, yes, I can send you a copy of the books, Sabrina. That's no problem. But they would just be for your information, not for the diet, because you'd need to see somebody about that. But you have a copy. And also, they can't be photocopied or distributed. They have to be bought through King's.
Yeah.
And without people doing that, then King's won't have any money to put into the research that we do.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. Well, sorry.
I wouldn't want anybody copying them and handing them out.
No. That's fine. No, makes a lot of sense. But I myself, anyway, I'm going through. It's another big organisation down in London. I'm actually having the full sort of parasites and stool sampling done, because I just want to eliminate every possibility. I mean, just by off interest, do you think that has anything to do with IBS or IBS-like symptoms? Because I know, again, there's lots of different schools of thought that IBS is simply heightened sort of reactivity down there, and some people say it's due to candida and parasites, and you can have you can have tests for that. What's your opinion and view on that, Marianne?
I think if there's a risk that you've got parasitic infections, then it's definitely good to rule it out. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Some parasitic infections can cause symptoms very similar to irritable bowel syndrome. So if you think there's a risk that that could be in your case relevant, then yeah, definitely get that checked. It would be something that a lot of gastroenterologists do run tests of parasitic infections. And you know, great, because that could be solved quite easily, can't it, with the necessary medication.
Yeah, I think
there are lots of things that can look like IBS, and I think that's always the reason why you need to go to a specialist and get it looked at.
No, it makes sense. But you've been absolutely fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you. Is there any final? Oh, the last thing before you go is, obviously, as this is Fuel Yourself Fabulous.tv, one bit of advice or superfood or super nutrition or anything that's dear to you, what advice could you give our viewers and listeners to fuel themselves fabulous?
Eat 3 meals a day and don't restrict your diet unnecessarily.
Yeah,
that's the biggest thing, because I think it's always really sad when I see people who've really, really restricted their diet. They've gone round and round in circles trying to find a solution, and they end up hating food and ruining their social life because you can't eat that with friends anymore, and it's just a nightmare. So eat regularly and eat a good variety of food unless there is good reason not to. And I think that's what I would say, is don't restrict your diet unnecessarily. Get proper advice so that if you are going to restrict it, it's done with guidance.
Yeah, you should always eat the colours of the rainbow, shouldn't you?
I'm not sure about the purple.
Well, blueberries,
yeah.
and raspberry, and what else? There's a few fruits that are purple, aren't they?
There are. You're quite right. There are.
But no, brilliant. Thank you very much. So until the next show is with Heather Van Boris of Heather's Tummy Care. So that, again, should be a really interesting discussion, and I'll put the banners up for that soon. But on a parting word, if someone wants to book themselves in to see you or get in touch with you, how can they do that, Marianne?
I've got a website, which is just wisediet.co.uk, and they're very welcome to have a look at that. But you know, they don't necessarily need to come and see me. Any dietitian that's trained in FODMAPs would be absolutely fine. But yeah, I have the website, which is wisediet.co.uk.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, over and out. Sabrina Khan, Fuel Yourself Fabulous.tv, and Marianne Williamson.
Thank you.
Oh, that was